Well, again, Ron, thank you. Thanks everyone who preceded me. As always, Ron, I've presented with Angelbeat several times, and I'm always learning something new. So thanks to the folks from Trellix as well as my colleagues here at AWS. It's always something new, and I think that's what's so exciting about this area. So hello, everybody. My name is John O'Donnell. I'm a principal solution architect here at AWS. Been here for a little bit over 7 years. Primarily background, I actually did work for the federal government a long time ago. Kind of moved into private industry, mostly working in big pharma and life sciences. So again, very nice to meet you all. And again, feel free to reach out, as everyone mentioned, if you have any questions. So we're going to cover, I would kind of give you like a two for today. So we're going to have going to cover two areas. So the AWS Gov Cloud, you may or may not have heard of that. So I'm going to cover that. And then also, surprise, some generative AI use cases that we're hearing from specifically from government customers. So let's jump in. So what is AWS Gov Cloud? So it's basically, again, if you heard of it, if you've used it, you know what it is. If you don't, it's not relatively well known. But essentially, it's an isolated AWS infrastructure for customers with strict regulatory compliance with the US federal government. There are other sovereign clouds in Europe and other countries that are there, but we're going to cover federal government Gov Cloud for today. Very high security compliance standards for controlled unclassified information, right? So again, very specific to the government nomenclature as far as how the information is done. Where this falls in for some private companies, if you're not in the government, is for things if you're working with the government. I'll kind of cover this as well as you have export controlled. For example, I worked with DuPont several years ago, and some of the products, like Kevlar and other products, could be used for cross purposes, so they fell under these type of restrictions. This started about over 10 years ago now, 2011, in our West Coast, helping federal government and government-related agencies as well as private entities have frankly, a much easier way to get compliant with the federal government regulations. And it's AWS. It's just a slightly different flavor. So again, there's two Gov Clouds, one in the West and one in out West in Oregon, and then one in Ohio. We won't tell you where it is, but they're in somewhere in those states. So we'll go through the characteristics of Gov Cloud. And again, I'm not going to read all this to you. You can read it. But I think it's really interesting just calling out some like highlights of this is sustainability is a big thing for many government and private companies. 100% renewable energy by next year, on track for that, actually a little bit ahead. In some areas, carbon neutral by 2040. So again, great stuff if you're doing reporting, those type of things. That's kind of just baked in. You don't have to worry about that. So sustainability with performance and resiliency. So you're not trading one off the other. You're not running servers in your data center. This stuff is built from the ground up to be sustainable and energy efficient. From technical perspectives, there's a separate IAM stack, which is identity and access management, not related to the commercial cloud. So it's a completely separate setup that you have. And anyone who has access to any of these accounts from the AWS side, your technical account managers, support, are all US citizens. So you won't violate any of the laws that are out there as far as that. FedRAMP, DoD, NIST, all that stuff's built in. And again, the services basically are out there. Again, and I'll cover this, but the redundancy upon redundancy, the number of cloud services, right? It's beyond just EC2 now. As of the date of this slide, it was 142 available services. Gov Cloud does lag the commercial cloud by sometimes months, if not years, depending on the service, mostly paperwork and regulatory type of stuff. But it's rapidly getting close to feature parity for that. So moving forward, So what are typical customers of GovCloud? So obviously federal, state, and local government could use it. Again, if you fall under the remit and the within the laws that where you're have to use it. But again, as I mentioned, it doesn't stop there. There's research organizations, nonprofits, educational institutions, aerospace. I won't mention other space firms. The big ones are out there. They're using these type of things, right? But basically, any company that has contractual obligation to the federal government to kind of meet what I've covered before can leverage GovCloud, and it's pretty much. Yeah, I had a customer who used it, and it's work. It's different, but certainly they were able to get it and worked very well with them. So like in a nutshell, pretty much any sector, any customer can use this. And again, the fact that all these controls and all these standards are baked into it makes the onboarding and the process of this that much more straightforward. So let's cover the infrastructure. So it's a little bit different. So if you're familiar again with our commercial cloud, say US East 1, which is in Virginia, the government cloud is fully compartmentalized. There's no connectivity between West and East unless it's set up, and there was ways to do that. But again, by design, these are fully isolated and compartmentalized offerings, clouds for that. Completely dedicated and unique. Again, as I mentioned, redundant and minimizing any type of interconnectivity with other cross-regional. So you could run something completely alone in US Gov East 1, and it'll run completely independent of Gov West 2. There's no reason to have interchange between that. Why that's important is that an event, a contagion, something that happens in one region will not affect the other. And resiliency, frankly, is government workloads that run within this are critical, right? And resiliency is critical, right? So you're a healthcare provider, you're providing research to the federal government or through a contract, right? It's important that that cloud is operational and running for you 24/7, 365. And that's really the goal of this. And I think, again, the ability that you can leverage your skills and your training in the commercial side into the GovCloud is, again, a great another, again, not selling it to you, but again, a nice thing that I'll have to learn something new to run applications in here. And then from a infrastructure perspective, so as I mentioned before, the regions are based in different states of the East and West Coast. Then each region is comprised of what's called availability zones. If you're not familiar with that, one availability zone is several physical data centers that are distributed across a geographical area. We can't disclose the number of them, their locations, but there's enough there that if any one, two, or even sometimes three of those data centers went offline, that availability zone will continue to operate. Each data center is completely partitioned and hardened for that. Interesting on different floodplains. So if there's weather here in the eastern U.S. at least, it's very hot, and then we get crazy thunderstorms in the afternoon. There's been flooding here where I'm at. These are built in areas that either don't flood or they're on different areas. So again, so much thought goes into designing these regions and these availability zones, right? Redundant. HVAC, huge. I don't know if you've seen some of the backup generators. They're bigger than a house. There's a lot going on there. So these data centers, these availability zones, continue to operate in a highly reliable and secure manner. And I think that's important because, again, what people expect from the cloud is that, and from the government and from the customers, is that this will be available when they're needed in a light of, say, for an emergency, for example. So you heard about GovCloud, sounds great. but there's a path here that, so if you, and I won't, again, don't have to read these to you. You want to go to AWS? Okay, great. You know, there's a basically this flow chart here that you go through. Because a lot of customers who do work with the government do not need to use GovCloud, right? Because it does add a whole another layer of operational, I wouldn't say complexity, but another layer of operations that's different from your commercial cloud. So if you don't meet if you don't need to do it, our recommendation is choose the standard cloud. Again, security is baked into all of them. But if any of these do happen to be part of your contract or your ATO with the working with the federal government, we're here for you, and that's what GovCloud covers. So that's GovCloud. Again, I'm going to give you a sampling of that at a future session, or if there's any follow-ups that folks want to do, we can certainly just, this is, I had to cull this from about 80 slides. There's a lot of detail that we can share for this if you're interested in learning more. But I just wanted to cover that and kind of give you, that's what AWS is doing in the government space. And again, other governments, other foreign governments, Europe, Asia, et cetera, they're standing up and they've built similar type of implementations. And now it's actually coming down to a country level. So like the US, Germany, France, right? They're building very specific government clouds for government tools, which is good. So you'll have a choice if you're a multinational company doing work with governments. So with that, I'm going to transition to some use cases for generative AI. So again, what we're hearing, that everyone talks about generative AI, no one's quite sure what to do with it yet. But there's concerns, as has been mentioned previously, right, by John and Sean. They're concerned about safety, security, accuracy, and cost, right? I mean, that's, liability, right? The government is trying to figure this out and leverage this. And I'll show you some use cases where we've seen this actually working. One thing I will note is that even within the government, even within federal agencies or state agencies, you want to differentiate yourself. You want to differentiate your agency from other agencies, right? And that's where generative AI can improve customer service, basically help you do more with less. I think as Trellix was showing is that different use case, but one generative AI routine, right, could do the work of many, many people, right? So I think that's where this becomes very powerful. So I'm going to walk through basically use cases near and dear to me. So I work, covering the healthcare space, and many of my customers work closely with the federal government through Medicare, Medicaid, different programs, doing research, et cetera, like that. So one of these cases here is the documentation task auditing. So kind of, some of this has been shown before, but, enabling a multimodal approach to patient documentation. So often if you go to one doctor, then to a specialist, and then you move and go to another doctor, your information's all over the place. Doctors' offices still fax things. Ron and I are probably the few people that remember fax machines, but it's literally, there's just a mountain of information out there. So in this use case, this is all synthetic data. There's no James Bond, MD. But looking at ingesting different data sets, and again, I did just put a link here where you can kind of look at some of these synthetic data sets if you're looking to play with generative AI. But let me walk you through the use case here. So these are different document sets in there. So I have a patient record, something from the insurance company, a scanned, fax record, for example. So again, documents, some of them are in text and highly structured. Some of them, for example, here are handwritten, and I can, some, hard to read, right? And then some of these are faxes, so they're kind of images of text, right? With, as you can see, a lot of artifacting and kind of, lines on the page, et cetera, like that. And then some of them are also graphical, right? So again, if you're from the clinical research side, a lot of this is part of the process, but this example is showing some recordings and some records of electromagnetic, or sorry, neurological activity of a patient. But it's in charts. And again, it's scanned, it comes through a fax machine, it's been photocopied a few times. So what we did is, when the folks that mentioned before, Amazon Bedrock, right, and the studio and kind of agents, right? What I'm going to walk through again, these are screenshots of what's called knowledge bases. So knowledge bases basically are using RAG, which is the John had mentioned before, so return augmented generation, right? So I'm able to add to, as smart as Claude 3.5 is, it doesn't know anything about what you're doing. It doesn't know anything about this patient, right? So I need to feed it information about these patients, their records, those type of things, and make it a little bit smarter, right? So again, walking through this is I'm going to create a knowledge base, and I upload a document. And after I've created, again, I've skipped some of the steps, but I've uploaded one document and asked it to create a summary. Based on all these different records, it also is smart enough to kind of give it in a chronological order. And again, I can't scroll through it to show you all the details, but it's smart enough to actually go through, again, multiple documents, multiple image types, and pull out information. So again, if you ever brought paper records to a doctor's office and they have to pour through it, I'm very good friends with my doctor, and he tells me what they have to go through, what researchers have to go through from all these different record sets. This is truly not only a time saver, but potentially a lifesaver in kind of emergency situations. So again, a really cool but simple use case of, let me just query all these documents that are glommed together in one big PDF file and search through it, but give it to me in a way that I can understand as a physician. So really cool stuff. Again, where we're seeing this is in hospital settings and research settings for that. But again, an example of that, leveraging the tool. Amazon Bedrock Studio is relatively new. It was launched not too long ago, but it's truly, it's a no-code environment to allow you to directly start playing with the stuff and building applications very quickly. So I'll do one more use case, then wrap it up. But this one is basically interesting use case that one of our developers built, that a user wants to create policy and procedures for within a government agency. And if you ever created policy and procedures anywhere, there's a lot of dependencies upon, for example, in the state, okay, what's the Commonwealth of Virginia's law about this, about that, right? So I don't want to make policies that contradict what the law is, right? So what we're going to show here briefly again is using reasoning, using generative AI to kind of generate policies from authoritative sources based on actual government policy. So basically I have a employee handbook, for example. Every company has some sort of handbook. The department, so this section 3.5, right? Again, just showing you examples of documents that have been ingested into this. Standards of conducts, right? And again, you're seeing complete differences in how the documents are laid out. Some are in tables, right? Like tables are very difficult for traditional systems to kind of parse information out for that. So again, I'll walk you through a little bit deeper dive of the knowledge base. So again, I'm in Bedrock Studio. I'm going to create what's called HR policies. I'm going to use Titan. Titan is the Amazon first party R model, but again, you could use Claude, you can use Mistral, you can use any model that's out there. So I'm going to create the knowledge base, and I uploaded here a bunch of different documents. So all the different policy documents, things that I have out there, ensuring that when the model is running and doing the return augmented generation, it has that full corpus of documents to query. And then I'm going to give it a prompt here. And as John had mentioned, and Sean, other folks, right? One of the arts with this is prompting. And it's something you learn over time. I've taken courses on it. But I'm going to create basically a relatively straightforward prompt here. And what you can do in part of this tool is, as you're developing this, you can create pre-generated prompts, so users don't even have to type it in. It can just click a button and generate me a policy. So here's one. Says, create me a policy that ensures compliance with the Code of Virginia, blah, 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 right? So it's going to run that, parses through all those documents, and then it's going to give you a draft, as Ron mentioned, trust but verify with these type of things. It's going to give you something that's really, really, really close. You'll want to check it because there's a thing called hallucination, which is basically the model just doesn't know what to do, so it makes things up. With guardrails, with other things that were mentioned previously on the call, those are far, far less than they used to be. In fact, almost some areas almost non-existent. But again, it'll generate something that could take you weeks. For example, I have a customer in the clinical space that it took them 6 to 12 weeks to generate one document off a clinical protocol. They got that down to 6 days, right? So because again, the review and the approvals and the vetting of those type of things, but the ability for this to help you generate these type of complex documents in a very short period of time is really amazing. So in conclusion, I think what's really important about generative AI and government tech, right, is that there's so much data. Like government's been computerized for years. The IRS is still running COBOL, right, and mainframes out there, right? There's data that's just 40, 50 years old of just so much data out there, and it's unique, right? It's not particularly of interest for most areas, and it's very domain specific to the federal government. So really the key for this and why I showed you some of these examples is, yes, I can use a general model and get some answers, but I also need to feed it my data, what's important to me, and kind of tune it and tweak it. And understand that the things that you're seeing, this is an iceberg. Models orchestration are above the waterline, but where it gets where it gets more complicated, where I would recommend spending your time while you're learning generative AI is getting your data house in order, right? Because without good data, you're not going to have good generative AI. So again, structured, unstructured data, all these different data stores, the data lake example that was shown earlier, right, by the Trellix team, right? Like that's big, right? So if you have, curated data sets, you're gonna have really good generative AI. So again, something I would say, this is the thing I would want to leave you with is people are playing with the models, but again, if the data is right, you're gonna have just amazing output. So with that, thank you. And Ron, as always, I appreciate the opportunity to present.